So when I was in college, my friends and I lived in a women's-only dorm, and we created a Sunday night catch-up. It started informally, but then became pretty much a weekly thing, something that none of us wanted to miss. We'd order a couple of infamous Domino's pizzas, because that's what you did. We'd gather in whoever's dorm room was the cleanest and could hold us, and then we would start to have an opportunity to share what had happened over the weekend. Since it was college and we were emerging into adulthood, the biggest news was sometimes who got together with who, what the good parties were, and just what were some of the best things that had happened over the weekend. But there were also other things. There were relationship challenges. There were big assignments that were due that we were stressed about. Or there were concerns about interactions with our families at home. These catch-ups were often filled with squeals of laughter, a lot of joy, and a fair share of tears. There were some informal rules about our catch-up. What happened in the room stayed in the room. It was sacred space. If someone was having a really hard time, we would come and check up on them during the week and see how that they were doing. And very importantly, if somebody said they had a crush on somebody, that person was off limits. We saw each other through breakups, some regrettable actions, possibly fueled by alcohol, and some overall messy attempts of navigating adulthood. At the time, we just thought it was a time to catch up and find out what was going on and be, quote, in the know. But now I look back on it and see it for what it was. A covenantal relationship. I'm so grateful to talk with you today and talk about covenant. It's something that I'm passionate about, and I think it's great to talk about when you all are in transition, as I've heard you've been in transition for a while. I think when things are in flux, it can be easy to take our anxieties out on each other. And I hope today is a reminder for you about your covenant with each other. And especially in a denomination where we don't have a specific creed or set of beliefs, we need reminders that it is our covenant that creates our sacred bond. As you heard in the reading today, to covenant means to come together. As adults, we make all kinds of covenants. If we get married, we promise or covenant to love and respect, perhaps to be faithful, perhaps to love through sickness or in health. If we have children, we promise or covenant to care for the child, to keep it safe, to instill values, and surround it with community. We make covenants with other members of our family to stay in relationship, even when the family member is of another political party. Maybe especially when a family member is in a different political party. And we make covenants with our friends to be with them in hard times, to check on them, to stand with them, to laugh and cry with them. These promises are our covenants with each other. Sometimes they're hard. Sometimes they're really, really hard. And many times we don't keep them. We want to. Our best selves yearn to be in covenant with each other. Unitarian Universalism is a covenantal religion. That means everything comes back to our covenant. I see you all here at Mountain Vista. You have a lovely covenant. Let me remind you of it. With love as our guide, we covenant to welcome the stranger, encourage and support one another, honor our diversity, ask questions with an open mind and an open heart, listen deeply and seek understanding, speak directly and compassionately when we have differences, and trust one another and remain in community while differences are resolved. Those are some big promises that you're making to each other. And sometimes our covenant is actually even beyond those written words. It's a promise to treat each other well as sacred community members, to hold ourselves to that higher standard in everything we do. Our covenant to do faith together has been here long before we got here, and it will be here long after we're gone. The idea of covenantal religion was actually one of the cornerstones of the colonizing people of America. When the Puritans were defining the early church in New England, they wanted it to specifically be different than the authoritative Church of England from which they had left. Now, I need to be very clear here. We need to constantly remind ourselves that these people came to the country under the misguided idea of manifest destiny. They conquered native people who lived here and laid claim to land that was not theirs. Some of their theologies were repressive and have tentacles that still affect us today. And yet, much of how we practice religion today comes from those Puritans and that history. And whether we like them or not, our way of managing our Unitarian Universalist congregations came from them. There's a document called the Cambridge Platform from 1648. It's actually a critical document in our UU history that defines the principles of a covenantal church. It was pretty radical at the time. It says that we come together not only by word of mouth, but by sacrifice, and also sometimes by silent consent, without any writing or expression of words at all. As a reaction to the oppressive religious environment that they came from, the Puritans embraced a free religion. They advocated for free speech, dissent, open debate, tolerance of different opinions, and a disciplined search for truth. They also saw this as an act of democracy and community. Instead of putting all of the power in the hands of a small elite that was not interested in the welfare of all, without consent or accountability, they created a collective agreement, collective accountability, one that included the free conscience of each individual in a mutual commitment to the common good. So it's not enough in our time to say that we're in covenant with each other. We've got to practice it. This is the same in our lives as it is in our congregations. My wife, who's here with me today, just celebrated one of our wedding anniversaries. We have two. It's a long story. But at our wedding, I said some lovely words to her. They were beautiful. They made her cry. She said some lovely words back to me. But it turns out that that's not enough. We have to just keep practicing. We can't just say the words and be done. We need to practice every single day how to live those nice words. We make a covenant, and then we break it. We screw up. We say something without thinking. We get tired of the work that it takes to be in covenant, like Hannah in our story today. Or sometimes we're just tired and cranky. We break our covenant, and we must practice getting back into it. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying that we do it anyway because ours is a covenantal faith. So thank you for singing Come, Come, Whoever You Are with me. You all jumped into that as if you'd sung it last week. I love this song, but I really like the version that we did with the second line, because listen to the whole Rumi poem. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, it doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times. Come, yet again come. So when we sing the song the way it is in the hymnal, without the though we've broken our vows 1,000 times, the hymn doesn't actually make a lot of sense to me. Like, what is this caravan of despair, and why are we lovers of leaving? And why are we singing about that? Why is that good? But magically, when we put that line, though we've broken our vows 1,000 times, all of those words come clearer for me. What does breaking our vows in a congregation look like? We often think of the really big breaches, but oftentimes, it's the small cuts that hurt. Sometimes it's saying something abruptly or unkindly. It may be not completing what we said we would do. It may be getting upset with someone and not talking to them about it. Or worse, talking to somebody else instead of them about it. Sometimes it means, as it's happened to me, that we say something out of places of our privilege that hurts our siblings of color, of different sexual or gender identities, or those of different classes, among others. We're human. This happens. The key is not how we break it. The key is then how we make it right again, finding our way in love and compassion. So let me tell you a story, and maybe a little secret. I've actually given this service before. Shh, don't tell anyone, okay? And when I was giving it before, I was talking about our Puritan forebears. And in the church that I was at, there's a line after the service where people can come and say hi, as often is done. And a young woman, a woman of color, came up to me and said, "You look like the type of person that can handle feedback." And it was both a question and a statement. She was waiting to see if I affirmed it, to see if she was safe for that. And I said, "Yes, of course, I love feedback, and I really do." And she said, "You said our Puritan forebears." And I knew immediately. She said, "They weren't my forebears." And I said, "I am so sorry. You're absolutely right. And thank you for saying something. And I'm sorry that you needed to educate me on that. And I will make that change." I don't know her name, but she changed me with that comment. I wish she hadn't had to make it, but she let me know, and I was able to say, "I'm sorry," and change it, and tell you about it. Because this is how we break covenant, and this is how we try to get back into covenant again. We have broken our vows 1,000 times, and yet we come, yet again come. For me, our covenantal faith is even more relevant for our times than it was for the Puritans, because it is an antidote to our individualistic culture. In the United States, people are already more individualistic than most cultures. This is the land of the Lone Ranger, which was glorified, heading out into the wild, wild west and overcoming adversity all by himself, even though we know that none of us do anything all by ourselves. There's this mythology that each one of us is in an island in control of our own destiny, and we know that's not the case. And our postmodern industrial capitalistic system just accentuates this. We're out to make the most money, rise to the highest position we can, take care of number one. You know, all the slogans that mean that we want to win no matter what the cost is. And often the cost is high. On those we have to step on to get into that position, on those who are marginalized and who get left behind in the scramble, and especially our environment in the winner-takes-all land grab. In living in a covenantal relationship, we are saying this community, our beloved community, is greater than the individual. That what is important for us collectively is actually more important than what is important to us individually. That is some major counterculture stuff right there. But then, and this is the main reason I love covenants, because our way of being in relationship together is not just good for us, but it also leads to social change. The Puritans' emphasis on covenants challenged the status quo. By saying that they were going to work cooperatively and democratically, they challenged economic systems that neglected the poor, justice systems that were unfair, prison systems that were cruel, and economic practices that concentrated the wealth in the hands of a few. There are a lot of ways that we can change the world. We can march. We can have protests. We can pass resolutions. We can sign petitions. Those are all important. But I think the biggest way that we impact the world is to be the change we wish to see in the world, as Mahatma Gandhi says. As much as I cannot individually change the world, the country, not the state of Arizona. Heck, I can't even change my own town. But I can change my own church community. And I know that I've changed mine. And I bet you've changed yours as well. So this is our radical idea, that by living in covenant with each other, we are modeling the world that we want to be. We are practicing, as you all say, how to be in the world in a better way. We are envisioning the way that we want the whole world to be by practicing it in our own community, right here, right now, every day. And then here's the other rub about practicing our covenant with each other. We need to make sure it's the right covenant. We need to make sure it's a covenant that is upholding our highest values and the morals of who we want to be in relationship. A covenant doesn't work if it's just the one that we've had around for 30 years. But then it still upholds a white supremacy culture even when we're trying to break it down. That is not a moral covenant we want to live by. A covenant that advantages those of us who are able-bodied or older or younger or who have more UU experience or less is not a covenant that models how we want to be in the world. So then it gets really, really hard, right? Because then we need to look at the covenant ourselves and see if we need to change it. We must listen to the voices who feel like the covenant isn't working for them. And then we need to find a new covenant that feels fair and equitable and holds us to our higher standards. And sometimes that means hearing that how we've done it not only isn't working anymore, but it's hurt some of those that we seek to be in community with. Ouch, that hurts. This is one of the many reasons I appreciate the efforts of an organization within the larger Unitarian Universalist community called Black Lives of UU. How many of you know this organization? Good. I encourage you to look it up because they exist to provide support to Black UUs and to challenge the systemic issues that have made Unitarian Universalism an unwelcoming place for them. They have actively said, we have covenants that have hurt us, and yet we still want to be in community and find a new way. And even though, and this is the best part, we have been hurt, we want to help lead the way. And to that I say yes, sign me up, I will follow, let me help. Similarly, this week, our Unitarian Universalist denomination hurt people in our community. There was an article that came out in the UU World magazine that was written by a non-transgender person about being trans. Rightly so, the trans and non-binary UU community felt invisible and hurt and wondered how this could have happened. But yet, similarly to Blue, they have come out and told us how to be in covenant with us. We don't deserve to have somebody help lead us through us hurting them, and yet they are telling us how to be in covenant with them. So I'm going to be listening, and I'm going to try to do better and come yet again back into relationship again. So covenant. This is not just an exercise in governance. It is a way we wish to live in the world. It is not just words, it is a commitment to being our very best selves. It is not just an internal statement, it is a statement to the whole world on who we are and how we want to be in relationship with every single person we encounter. That is our opportunity and it is our obligation. This audacious, bold, courageous idea that the world that we want to create has already arrived, and that we can be living it out right here, right now, in our slice of the community, breaking our vow 1,000 times, and then coming, yet again coming, back into covenant with each other. I invite you now to find the journal that you received when you entered. And if you didn't get one, raise your hand and Jobar will bring you one. After I give you the prompt, you will have 4 minutes or so to respond. And you can do it in words or in pictures, drawings, doodles. These are anonymous and public reflections, and they give us the practice of being reflective, authentic, and generous. And if you don't feel like writing, you don't have to. You're invited to read the words written by others, finding some connection there with what has been said. So here is your prompt. What is one way that you can be in better covenant within your Mountain Vista UU community, here and also within the wider world? How can you be in better covenant? You may begin.